Yeah, that was episode 6, A Golden Crown. And we had one major notable death this episode, the death of Viserys Targaryen. He was crowned rather magnificently by Khal Drogo. Yeah, so Tyler, how did you feel about episode 6?
Overall, I thought it was a really good episode. I thought it advanced the story pretty well overall. We're still kind of getting to the thick of things. Yeah, so we're over the halfway point by now. So I think we're really getting into the nitty gritty when it comes to this season. So I think it's ramping up to be a really interesting conclusion with everything that we saw between the stuff with Tyrion, the Ned mystery, especially with like what we left on with Ned, where he's noticing that all of the Baratheons have black hair except Joffrey. I'm assuming that's going to come back because that is a bit suspicious. I guess R.I.P. Viserys. I mean, it's just because he was like. I guess in the sense like I'm good. I'm good. Like I'm glad that he's gone because he was a terrible person, and I guess he kind of deserved what he got coming to him. But wow, what a way to go out.
Anna, your first episode with us randomly. How do you feel about episode 6 of season 1 of Game of Thrones?
Yeah, I said I was excited when you said that we were watching this episode in particular because I feel like this episode has a lot of stakes. It's one of the episodes in season 1 where you're like, oh my god, there's potential to have like major deaths here, especially if you're like watching it for the first time and feel like this is like an episode where you can be on the edge of your seat a bit. Yeah, I love season 1 so much, so I think that just every episode in it is just so good.
Well, let's go ahead and just talk about some of the plots and discuss them a little bit further. So we saw that Robert instructed Ned that he would not be leaving King's Landing and instead would be remaining as Hand of the King, whether he liked it or not. But later in the episode, we saw Ned make the decision that even if he has to stay in King's Landing as Hand of the King, he is going to send Sansa and Arya back to Winterfell, much to Sansa's dismay. Good Prince Joffrey made up with her and gave her a necklace. Arya was a little bit sad because of her dance instructor. And I didn't realize in the show they don't make it clear. In the books, they do make it clear that Ned agrees to send Syrio back to Winterfell with her. So Arya literally is just like, cool, if he's coming with me, I'm down to go home. But we then see Robert go on his hunting trip in which he has quite a fiery discussion with his brother, Renly Baratheon, who also has black hair. Yeah, how did you feel about Robert's entire story, I guess, in this episode, Tyler?
I mean, it's definitely a lot to take in because it seems like I mentioned it before. The whole stuff with Robert Baratheon and everyone having black hair except for Joffrey. I feel like that's definitely a major plot point that's going to come up. I'm curious to see where we're going to go with that. As far as his family goes, I know his family. There have been talks. I know him. Was it last episode where him and his lover, secret lover, Finn Jones, they were having talks about trying to potentially poison him. And I think that especially based on their interaction in this episode, I could definitely see that kind of happening because it seems like they're kind of at wit's end with each other. But yeah, I mean, Robert Baratheon. He's quite a character, I will admit. It's interesting seeing my feelings for him shift as the episodes go on because I did like him a lot in the beginning.
Do you feel or remember feeling about Robert Baratheon, Hannah, leading up to through episode 6, through what we just saw?
Yeah, there's a lot to. I can't like do predictions like Tyler because I know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
There's just so much to unpack with this character. One of the more interesting journeys that you go on, like watching someone involve. So
Then we also head back north. Bran, once again, has a dream that he can run and shoot arrows, and he sees that raven with the 3 eyes. And up there, he gets a saddle. Yay! He can ride horses on his Tyrion-designed saddle. But when he goes out for a ride, he is ambushed by wildlings who are looking to rob him. But Robb Stark and Theon Greyjoy to the rescue. They save him and take the female wildling as a captor. We don't really see much of Robb from there, but we do see Theon saying goodbye to Roz as she decides to head on down to King's
Poor
Landing.
Theon.
So, how did you feel about the story in the North, Tyler?
Robb Stark. I like Richard Madden. I think we're still kind of getting more of like an idea of him as a character, because I feel like we really still have no idea like what his whole personality is, and same with Theon. I think Theon's an interesting like character. I think he's kind of funny, and I'm curious to see where he's going to grow as the series goes on for however long he's on it. Nice to see Bran get some action on the horse, so he's obviously mobile in some regard. The wildlings, maybe they'll talk about the White Walkers and all that stuff. And seeing as how we didn't get any Jon Snow or anything at the Wall again this episode, I figure we'll probably maybe eventually get something, between talking about the wildlings, about maybe the White Walkers, since winter's coming and all that hoopla that we hear about famously.
They did name drop White Walkers, so that's why.
That's what I mean.
Running away, running south.
That's what I figured. They're probably scared after what happened in the beginning of the whole show.
But I don't know if they've made it clear. The other purpose of Jon and the rest of the Rangers up at the Wall is not really to keep out the White Walkers, because most people think that they're extinct, but is to keep out those wildlings from crossing beneath the Wall.
so basically what you're saying is Jon Snow and all them are failing at their job.
I mean, that's what happens when you get a bunch of thieves and cheese stealers. So, once again, as you remember, up through this point, Hannah, how are you feeling about Bran, Robb, and Theon up north?
Yeah, when I was mentioning that this episode has a lot of stakes, like this section in particular is what I mean. We get a bit more action in this episode. I think prior to this one, there's not a whole lot. So seeing like the whole like standoff thing in the forest it's exciting. I like this part of Game of Thrones. Like these parts of Game of Thrones where it's like, like the standoffs and like the big action set pieces and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like they're so like way more exciting than like most stuff on TV. So
I finally finished book one. Hey, another instance where they were definitely like, oop, CGI budget, because the wolves play a part in that standoff. We go up to the Eyrie where Tyrion demands that Lysa Arryn give him a trial, and she says, sure, I'll give you a trial. My son Robin here, who has already expressed very vocally that he wants to see you thrown out that door, will hear what you have to say and decide your fate. So instead, Tyrion says, no, we're not going to do that, and demands that she give him a trial by combat. And Bronn, the sellsword, who followed them up here, was part of their little team, fights for Tyrion, kills her knight, and frees Tyrion Lannister from both Lysa's control, but also frees him from Catelyn's control. So she no longer has Tyrion as her prisoner. So, Tyler, how'd you feel about Tyrion's little storyline?
I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it because I enjoyed Tyrion a lot as a character. Him just being, witty and throwing up his stand-up routine. It almost felt like of all of his escapades he got up to as a child, and just, I mean, that whole the Child King. I'm not a big fan of that character. I'm glad that we kind of are moving away at least from them. At least it seems like. But I thought the actual battle was cool. That seems like an interesting character. I mean, I know him. I think I know him more than a lot of these other characters just because I know his face from memes, because he is a very popular meme, like his face. But I don't know anything about the actual context behind the meme. But yeah, I mean, he seems like a real stand-up guy. So I'm just kidding. But the battle was nice, and it was really interesting seeing somebody actually fall through that hole. Just because I just was so perplexed by them having this big hole that takes you such a far down space down below.
All right, Hannah, thoughts on Tyrion as well as Lysa and Robin Arryn and Catelyn Stark?
Yeah, another big stakes kind of moment. I think that just Tyrion's just one of the more entertaining parts of the show, because Game of Thrones can be little grating sometimes.
Yeah.
Like waiting or just a lot of like brutal, hard to watch stuff. And Tyrion, he's definitely involved in, some stuff like that, but he's a good kind of like his stories are kind of like good breather for sometimes. Even though this is like a big like stakes moment for him, there's still like, a good amount of like comedic relief.
Were you taken aback when you saw Lysa breastfeeding her very large child?
I was.
Tyler was, I guess, touched by it.
I was just like, what the heck is this?
Ned didn't do much else this episode because, I mean, he was literally hobbled, is struggling with his health. But other than telling his daughters he's going to send them back up north, as you said, he is continuing to read up and try to piece together all of the mystery. But in the king's place, since he is off hunting to clear his mind, Ned has to hear of this savage, aka the Mountain, that we learned, who came through and completely destroyed and brutalized this town and these people. So Ned decides to send out an army of people to bring in the false knight, Sir Gregor Clegane, and on top of that, sent a raven to tell Tywin Lannister he has to report to the capital for punishment based on his bannerman. But that was really our only scene with Littlefinger, as well as he kind of egged Ned on off to the side. And then we saw Pycelle off to the other side, just aghast at Ned Stark making decisions. So how did you feel about Ned this episode, Tyler? He's even looking more rough. You comment every episode about how he like looks worse and worse each episode.
I think he does. I start to feel, because I really think he's just like, it's just wearing on his health physically and mentally, like just the barrage of mess that he seems to be going through every episode, whether he's, fighting off, assassin, he's taking on like the stuff with the mystery with who murdered John Aaron, and now he's looking into stuff with the Baratheons, so he opens that book and sees all of the Baratheons with their black hair, and then there's Joffrey, and he's obviously having, squabbles with the Rob Baratheon. So, I mean, I think it's all coming to a head, obviously, as we're getting closer to the end of the season. Obviously, we're going to get to it eventually, but I am curious to see what the conclusion is going to be, for better or for worse, with Ned, because I feel like we're eventually going to hit a rough patch with him, just because I feel bad, and he's also played by Sean Bean. So I'm always skeptical about Sean Bean and anything, and I think that just leads into, like, I guess what's probably going to happen with Ned Stark, because he's just getting battered every episode. I just feel bad for him.
What were your thoughts on Ned Stark up through episode 6, Hannah?
Yeah, I wish I was watching it for the first time, because like I can't do like predictions.
Yeah.
So I can't say a whole lot other than there's just like a lot more to come and a lot more to like uncover. I think that it's like the mystery is built up very well. I'll say that.
Yeah, I that's what I've been saying this whole time. He's like the kind of like Sherlock Holmes throughout this whole show so far, and it's just like he's always getting into some sort of mystery. It seems like each episode so far, for better or for worse, for his own health. It seems like it's not working out for him too well.
I've been
Sweating everywhere.
They don't really care about mental health.
No, there's probably no mental health days in Game of Thrones. But.
Clearly, he couldn't even quit his job. So
yeah, your resignation has been denied.
Yeah.
And then this episode, unlike episode 5, we spent quite a bit of time across the narrow sea with Daenerys, Viserys, Khal Drogo, and the rest of the Dothraki in Vas Dothrak, which I had mentioned before, and they mentioned as well, is like a sacred city to the Dothraki. So as part of their rules, this is an area where all of the different Dothraki hordes can come together. They're not allowed to fight. They have to be peaceful in this land. No weapons are allowed on the grounds, and no blood is allowed to be shed, which of course plays into Viserys and his behavior this episode. But before we get to all of that, Dany is spotted eating a horse's heart.
Yeah, that was a bit odd, I will admit.
which is like a ritual for pregnant Khaleesi's to eat a horse's heart, and it is a good omen if she is able to finish it without throwing up, which she succeeds, and the crowd cheers, and it's declared that she is carrying the stallion that will mount the world. And then we see her also holding one of her dragon eggs, and her little handmaiden comes running in, scared for her. But we notice her handmaiden's hands get burned while Daenerys's stay pretty pristine. How did you feel about all of that early stuff with Daenerys, Tyler?
Well, it was quite shocking to start off with her just straight up just going ham on a horse's heart. Not what I was expecting, because I saw it looked like, I didn't know it was a horse's heart at first, of course, and then they revealed it a minute later it's a horse's heart. Like, Jesus Christ. It's a good, yay for positive pregnancy, even though it was still gross.
Hannah, you don't think you would pass that Khaleesi?
Ooh, I wouldn't either.
Definitely not.
You'd wrench
Horses,
right there.
well, horses' hearts are big.
I would throw up before I even put it near my mouth.
It was like this big.
Yeah.
But she's now accepted. The Dothraki, she has fully kind of embraced their culture and decided to be a Khaleesi and make the best of this hand she has been dealt by being sold off to Khal Drogo. So Viserys tries to steal her dragon's eggs to go and sell them, but Sir Jorah Mormont stops him in his tracks, shows his allegiance is leaning more toward Daenerys than Viserys at that moment, and also warns him about that sword of his because, once again, weapons are not allowed in this land. But Viserys runs off, gets drunk, and doesn't listen. Comes into their celebration feast of Daenerys eating that heart. Looks for Dany, but when Khal Drogo scorns him and tells him he can have a spot in the back of the room if he wants to stay, gets pissed. He puts his sword to Daenerys' stomach, threatens to cut the unborn child out of her belly unless Khal Drogo gives him the crown he was promised. And Khal Drogo sure gives him a golden crown, though not quite the one Viserys had planned for.
Plot twist.
Pours some molten gold over his head, killing Dany's older brother. And she ends the episode by saying that he was not a dragon, as a dragon cannot be harmed or killed by fire. How did you feel about all of that, Tyler? Viserys Targaryen.
I mean, it was very satisfying to see Viserys kind of just get his comeuppance. I mean, he's been one of my least favorite characters since the show started, at least in this couple episodes. So, it was nice in that regard. I think it was kind of evident that was going to happen. Well, I shouldn't say that was going to happen, but something bad was going to happen to him. Obviously, as he's disobeying the things that he's not supposed. He walks in with a sword and he's just barking orders at people. He's been rude to Daenerys the entire series so far. So it was not, and clearly it seems like Daenerys is just completely turned against him completely. So she's now full on Dothraki Khaleesi, and she's just all right, kill him. I don't care.
Yeah, and they did not spill blood either, so that was a good thing for Khal Drogo. I said, no, we can't spill blood in our capital, so
just poured it all over him.
How did you feel about Viserys, Hannah?
I mean, yeah, I feel the same as Tyler. I mean, I don't think anyone was like, oh my god, I love him so much. He's my favorite character. I wish he didn't die.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a satisfying major death in the series, especially with how brutal the death scene is, and what he was, obviously going there for, which was a crown, and he gave him a crown. So I think this is one of the more satisfying endings of an episode in this season, at least.
They've had a very weird relationship in these 6 episodes anyway, Daenerys and Viserys. So it's a very weird, there's a weird situation with them. So I guess I'm glad that we're gonna move away from Viserys, obviously by force since he's dead. So I guess we'll probably see more of Daenerys' personality flourish now that she's not really held back by anyone at all.
Yeah, I have to say, this was definitely one of my favorite moments in episode or season 1. I could not wait for Viserys. I'm like so thankful Viserys died as soon in the series as he's dead, because I'm like, oh God, if I had to deal with this character for for an entire season, even it would have been torture.
I felt a little bad laughing at the end when his head thudded on the ground from the molten
it's the sound
gold.
effect that does it.
It's like dong, like dong.
Yeah, that's so good.
This is like the first, other than some not pleasant sexual situations, this is the first like Khal Drogo action we received, really, too, because he's there. He's kind of just like lurking in the background most of the time. This is the first time we see him like actually do something.
Yeah, well, half the other
script is just look stern.
Yeah, like on the other most of his other interactions in the show, it was just him just like sexually assaulting Daenerys.
Yeah. So I guess we'll go with characters first, since Hannah can participate in this aspect. So to this point, Hannah, and just watching the episode here, do you remember who your least favorite and favorite characters were, kind of up through season 1, episode 6?
Like I said when we were watching it, Cersei, every time I think about her, it makes me roll my eyes.
Cersei.
She's just a burden. She's always a burden. So Cersei, even though I do like her in later seasons. And then Daenerys. Yeah, I feel like Daenerys is just always everyone's like favorite. Like, yeah, like.
Well, we know Larry's based on his background.
Do you like Arya?
I love Arya.
Train?
Arya and Daenerys are always like the two characters that I kind of switch between. I'm like, oh yeah, they're my favorites. So.
And you mentioned you find Tyrion funny.
Yeah, Tyrion and Sansa.
She's on the bottom tier for you.
Yeah, she's bottom tier.
She's rocking Cersei's hairdo, so she's down with Cersei on the list.
That's how it goes.
Sansa and then Cersei.
All right.
Cersei wasn't in this episode a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the last 2 episodes with Cersei are interesting because she does something that makes you hate her, because obviously her storming in there, telling Ned, you're not the hand of the king anymore, you're nothing, you stole my brother. She starts lying about what happened between Ned and Jaime in the street. But then you have to feel bad for her when, I mean, it was like a closed hand, almost punch to the face that Robert Baratheon gave to Cersei. It kind of shows her character. She's pretty resilient to that, as she just like gets real indignant with him and says, I'll wear it as a badge of honor, as like to shame you. But I mean, no matter how much you think a woman is terrible, to see her like get pretty much punched in the face by a very large man is like,
she got like Mike Tyson.
Yeah. And it kind of just leads you down this dark path with Robert. It just continues Robert on this like,
I know. It's a shame.
He's a much darker person than originally led on. Tyler, how about you? After this episode, faves, least faves? Where's everyone?
I think that, like, I mean, I don't. If I'm being honest, I don't remember what my faves and faves, like least faves, were, like in order as far as, because it's been a couple weeks. But I mean, currently at this moment, probably my favorites would be Tyrion, of course. I mean, I love Arya, at least from the glimpses we've had so far, even if she's not like a main focal point in a lot of episodes so far.
Like we mentioned before, even when she has very little screen time, Arya like steals all the scenes that she's in.
She's very charming. She's very charming and charismatic. Like,
and she's the face for the audience. Like you said, every time Sansa opens her mouth, we're all reacting like Arya.
But them, you know, Tyrion, Arya, Ned, of course. I really like Ned. I guess Bronn was pretty cool in this episode. I don't know if I would put him in the top, but he was a cool one. But least favorites, I mean, even if we're just including people from past episodes, well, I guess we can take Viserys off the board because he's dead.
He can stay one last day. This was his final episode as one of your least
I was going to say, I don't know.
The last time you can complain about him.
I was gonna say, is that how that works? Like, I'll include him even though he dies at the end, so it'll be the last time he's on the bad person I like category. Viserys, even though he wasn't in this episode, Jamie is up there.
His effects on poor Ned still lingered. So
Yeah, I know. Robert Baratheon's up there. Joffrey, of course, and just because of the interactions between them this episode, I'll put Sansa on the list as well. I just am not feeling that relationship, and it's just so
Joffrey's
bad.
apology didn't take him off of the worst list, Tyler.
No way! Like that was some BS with a capital B and a capital S.
So, prediction time.
I definitely think Robert Baratheon's going to come for them at some point because he wants to kill, them in general, but especially the child that Daenerys is harboring inside of her. I mean, I definitely see her dragons hatching at some point, and maybe by the end of the season, just because we keep, emphasizing them, and and now that Viserys is out of the picture, I feel like we're going to see Daenerys flourish more as a character in general.
They weren't stolen, so they're still around.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Fortunately, it wasn't like 2 dragons instead of 3, or because one got sold to somebody or something. But yeah, I mean them. More Ned mystery. I think that we're gonna uncover some mysteries when it comes to, I guess, Joffrey's actual parentage. Just because genetics wise, I mean, why is it that everyone has black hair that's a Baratheon, and then he has blonde hair? It just seems kind of off to me. I don't know if maybe there's some like weird secret love child thing going on there. I mean, it is Game of Thrones. We have seen that they indulge in the weird things in Game of Thrones sometimes. But I guess Tyrion is back, so he's probably going to storm back and talk some trash to people because he's free.
What are your predictions on the repercussions there, now that Catelyn no longer has Tyrion as her prisoner? That's kind of what Cersei and Jaime had confronted Ned about previously. Think it'll be positive, negative, or in different type of circumstances for Ned now that Tyrion is free?
I think Ned's gonna get screwed over in some shape or form because it just seems like we're leading down that path, especially as there's a lot of strain between him and the Lannisters, / Baratheons. So I think he's probably gonna take the blame for something, whether they frame him for something. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, I haven't seen the show, but
what about like Sansa and Arya now that Ned is planning to send them back to the north?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I don't know, because like I don't know what they're gonna be doing with Sansa and Arya. I mean, I hope that they're not kind of thrown in a story that's not as interesting. I'm hoping to see more of them. More of Arya, not so much Sansa. But
do you think that will have a ripple effect? Sansa being betrothed to Joffrey and Ned sending her away.
Probably. I mean, I don't want to be like blaming Sansa for everything, but she probably does at least. Sansa, it sounds like at least initially, kind of.
So easy.
I know. I don't want to blame her for everything, but I feel like she will play a hand into the downfall of Ned in some shape or form.
All right. Well, we shall see with episode 7 next week. So that was both our reaction in part 1 and our discussion, as well as our favorite and least favorite characters and predictions moving forward here in episode or part 2. Thank you both so much for joining me and discussing episode 6, the Golden Crown, with me, or a Golden Crown. Tyler, why don't you let everyone know where you can be found across the internet?
On YouTube, just Tyler Calvert, and then Twitter and Instagram at It's Tyler Calvert.
And our special guest for this episode, Miss Hannah, where can people find you?
At Rejected Hannah on Twitter.
You can also find all 3 of us on the Cinemania World podcast. Should check that out, especially if you want to hear more of Hannah. She is on a weekly show there, so you can hear her twice a week. So there you go. And if you liked this reaction and discussion, make sure to hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel so you are always up to date on all of my latest videos, including our Game of Thrones reactions every Thursday. I love you all so much for your continued support. Mwah! Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.